Many buildings today claim to be inspired by nature. They twist like shells, curve like leaves, or glow like forests at night. From a distance, they seem alive, symbols of harmony between humans and the natural world. But when you step closer, the illusion begins to fade. The plants need hidden pumps to survive. The green walls are fed by pipes and wires. The design may look natural, but it often functions like any other machine. This isn't just about appearances. It's about what these buildings really do and what they fail to do. Let's talk about how architecture has tried to copy nature, where it has succeeded, where it has fallen short, and why our future depends on moving beyond imitation. The forest hums with life. Birds call to one another through the trees. A stream moves over stones, steady and clear. Leaves shift in the breeze, creating a soft, rhythmic rustle. This world feels complete, balanced. Slowly, another sound begins to creep in. A car horn, the thud of heavy machinery, voices overlapping in a rush. The forest fades, replaced by the hum of a busy city. The contrast is sharp, almost jarring, as one world gives way to another. Nature has been building and refining for millions of years. Every spider's web is an engineering marvel. Delicate threads arranged in patterns strong enough to catch prey and withstand the wind. Pound for pound, that silk is stronger than steel. In another part of the world, towering redwood trees rise hundreds of feet into the air. Their roots spread wide, locking together beneath the soil in a network that supports the entire forest. Termites, among the smallest of creatures, create vast mounds in the African savanna. These structures keep their interiors cool despite blistering heat, using nothing more than tunnels, airflow, and the collective effort of the colony. No wires, no machines. Just design, shaped by time and necessity. These natural systems aren't random. They are the result of endless trial and error. Every curve, every joint, every way that air moves through a space or water follows a channel has been tested and improved over ages. When you look closely, nothing is wasted. Everything has a role to play. For centuries, humans have looked at these designs with a mix of awe and envy, asking a simple question: what if our buildings could do the same thing? This question is at the heart of biomimicry. Biomimicry is the practice of learning from nature and applying those lessons to solve human problems. The word itself became popular through the work of Janine Benyus, who described it as a bridge between biology and design. In architecture, biomimicry goes beyond making something that looks natural. It means creating structures that function like living systems, efficient, resilient, and deeply connected to their surroundings. Imagine a house that cools itself like a termite mound. Imagine a city that circulates water and nutrients like a forest. These aren't dreams. They are possibilities that nature has already proven to work. But there's a challenge. When humans borrow from nature, we often stay on the surface. We copy how something looks, not how it works. Think of a building shaped like a seashell. It might be beautiful and eye-catching, but it doesn't automatically make the building efficient or sustainable. Covering a wall with vines might soften its appearance, but that doesn't mean the structure will mimic the self-sustaining loops of an ecosystem. To understand how biomimicry works, it helps to think in 3 levels. The first is form and shape. This is the most visible level where we copy the appearance of nature. A museum shaped like a lotus flower, a roof that curves like a wave. These designs may be striking, but they only touch the surface of nature's wisdom. The second level focuses on natural processes. Here, we look at how nature does what it does. A good example is a cooling system based on termite mound ventilation. Termite mounds stay at a stable temperature because of how air moves through them. Engineers can study that process and apply it to design buildings that stay cool without relying on constant air conditioning. This step goes deeper than looks. It's about learning from nature's strategies. The third level is ecosystem thinking. At this level, design goes beyond individual buildings. It considers how everything fits together, like parts of a living organism. In a healthy forest, waste from one species becomes food for another. Nothing is lost. Cities could work the same way. Organic waste could feed urban farms. Energy and water could cycle through systems instead of flowing in one direction and ending in a landfill or a drain. Each part would support the others, creating balance and resilience. Most biomimetic architecture today stops at the first level. It stays with the look of nature, not its logic. That's understandable. It's easier to copy a shape than to build a self-regulating, interconnected system. But the deeper levels hold far greater potential. When a building doesn't just resemble nature but functions like it, the result is powerful. It can save resources, reduce harm, and create spaces that work with the environment instead of against it. Consider a city street. At level 1, designers might add planters shaped like leaves or benches that look like tree trunks. At level 2, they might include a stormwater system that filters and moves water the way a wetland does, reducing flooding while cleaning runoff. At level 3, the street becomes part of a broader network where water, energy, food, and waste all flow in cycles. Each part of the system supports the others. It's no longer just a street, it's part of an urban ecosystem. Nature shows us that true sustainability comes from connection. Nothing in a forest exists alone. Trees, soil, water, insects, and animals all interact. Human design often breaks those links. We build in fragments, with isolated systems that don't communicate. Biomimicry offers a different approach. By paying attention to how nature works, we can move beyond decoration and toward integration. It's tempting to stop at the first level because it gives quick, visible results. A shell-shaped building looks dramatic and can attract attention, but form alone doesn't solve the deeper problem. It doesn't make a building breathe, regulate, or adapt the way a living system does. To reach that point, we need to copy not just how nature looks, but how it loops. Waste must become input. Energy must flow in cycles. Systems must connect. A forest doesn't waste leaves. A termite mound doesn't need electricity. A spider's web doesn't require a blueprint. These designs emerge from relationships built over time. Humans have the tools to do something similar. The challenge is learning to listen and to see beyond appearances. To copy nature's look is easy. To copy its loops is the work. The connection between architecture and nature didn't begin with solar panels, rainwater tanks, or green roofs. It began long before those ideas existed, in a time when cities were choking on their own growth. In the late 19th century, the Industrial Revolution had transformed towns into sprawling, crowded centers of smoke and soot. Factories ran day and night, filling the air with coal dust. Streets overflowed with people, carts, and waste. Disease spread easily. The city was a machine built for production, not for health or beauty. Amid this chaos, reformers began to dream of a different way to live. One of the most influential voices was Ebenezer Howard, a British social thinker who believed that nature could heal the damage caused by industrial life. His idea became known as the Garden City movement. Howard imagined new towns that blended the best parts of the city with the best parts of the countryside. In his vision, neighborhoods would be surrounded by greenbelts, threaded with parks and tree-lined streets. Gardens would provide space for food and fresh air. Factories and homes would exist side by side, but with balance and order. On paper, it seemed like the perfect solution. People could enjoy the jobs and cultural life of the city while staying close to nature. When these ideas reached the United States, they evolved into something different, the modern suburb. Instead of shared gardens and public parks, each house had its own private yard. Streets stretched out into patterns of cul-de-sacs and driveways. From above, these neighborhoods looked like scattered islands of green. For many families, this felt like a dream come true. After years of living in crowded city apartments, moving to a quiet house with a lawn symbolized success and freedom. The lawn became a sign of stability, a patch of nature that belonged to you alone. But there was a hidden cost. These lawns weren't wild meadows or diverse ecosystems. They were artificial landscapes designed to fit a narrow idea of beauty. Grass species were imported and carefully managed to stay uniform and bright green. To keep them that way, homeowners poured on water, fertilizer, and pesticides. The result was a strange paradox. Suburbs were supposed to bring people closer to nature, yet they replaced natural habitats with shallow imitations. Native plants and animals disappeared, replaced by lawns that consumed vast amounts of resources while giving little back. The image of nature became a performance, maintained through endless effort. The lawn, in this sense, wasn't nature at all. It was a simulation, orderly, thirsty, and extractive. This approach shaped much of modern development. Cities and suburbs treated nature as a decoration or an escape, not as a living system to partner with. Instead of building within ecosystems, we cleared them away and then tried to recreate them in controlled, simplified forms. By doing so, we often disrupted the very processes that kept those landscapes alive. In the early 20th century, another figure challenged this pattern. Frank Lloyd Wright, one of America's most famous architects, believed that buildings should connect deeply to their surroundings. He rejected the idea of houses that simply sat on top of the land like foreign objects. Instead, he wanted to design structures that seemed to grow out of their settings. His work gave rise to what he called organic architecture, a philosophy that emphasized harmony between human-made structures and the natural world. One of his most celebrated works, Falling Water, shows this idea in action. Built in rural Pennsylvania, the house stretches out directly over a waterfall. From certain angles, it's hard to tell where the stone of the house ends and the stone of the landscape begins. Wright used materials from the site itself, like local rock and timber, to create a sense of continuity. Large windows opened the house to light and views of the surrounding forest. Instead of shutting nature out, Falling Water invited it in. For many, seeing this home was a revelation. It suggested that buildings didn't have to dominate their landscapes. They could be part of them, shaping experiences that felt connected and alive. Wright's vision stood in sharp contrast to the endless rows of identical suburban houses with their clipped lawns and paved driveways. But even this bold vision had its limits. Falling Water, while stunning, still reflected a human-centered perspective. The house was carefully planned to create a specific experience for its inhabitants. The stream and forest were adjusted to serve the design, rather than the other way around. The waterfall became a feature of the house, framed and controlled. This reveals an important tension. Wright moved closer to a genuine partnership with nature, but he didn't fully let go of control. The building remained the central focus, and the landscape existed to support it. In this way, Falling Water represents a step forward, but not the final step. The struggle between using nature as a backdrop and truly working with it would shape the next century of design. As cities grew and environmental pressures mounted, architects faced a choice. They could continue treating nature as something to be imitated or framed, or they could begin to learn from its systems and processes. Looking back, it's clear how deeply our early attempts to connect with nature were shaped by cultural values and technological limits. The Garden City movement offered hope for a healthier, greener urban life, yet it often resulted in sprawl and resource-heavy landscapes. Suburbs promised connection to nature, but in practice, they replaced vibrant habitats with controlled, sterile spaces. Wright pushed for a deeper integration of architecture and environment, showing what was possible when buildings responded to their sites. Yet even his work carried the imprint of human desire to shape and manage. These early efforts set the stage for what came next. They revealed both the possibilities and the pitfalls of blending human design with the natural world. They also highlighted a simple truth. It is far easier to place a building in a beautiful setting than it is to design that building as part of a living, dynamic system. The first attempts were bold, flawed, and deeply human. They remind us how challenging it is to shift from seeing nature as scenery to understanding it as a partner. On a blistering summer day in Harare, Zimbabwe, the air outside feels heavy and still. Temperatures soar past 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The streets shimmer with heat, and the buildings around the city seem to trap it, holding on to every bit of warmth. But inside the Eastgate Centre, something surprising happens. Offices remain cool and comfortable, even though there isn't a single traditional air conditioner running. At first glance, it feels almost magical. A large building without air conditioning sounds impossible, especially in a city where temperatures swing from intense heat during the day to cool nights. But the secret behind this design isn't magic. It comes from an unlikely teacher: termites. Across the African landscape, towering termite mounds rise like small earthen skyscrapers. These mounds aren't random piles of dirt. They are carefully built structures with a very specific purpose. Inside, millions of termites farm a special type of fungus that they rely on for food. This fungus can only survive within a narrow temperature range. Outside, the temperature might swing from freezing at night to scorching during the day. But inside the mound, the conditions stay steady. The termites achieve this balance without electricity or mechanical devices. They do it through design. The mound contains a complex network of tunnels and vents. Some openings pull fresh air in, while others release warm, stale air. The shape and layout of these passageways guide the flow of air naturally, creating a self-regulating system. As air moves through, it cools, warms, or circulates as needed. It's an elegant solution that has evolved over millions of years. Architect Mick Pierce studied these termite mounds closely. He realized that the same principles could be applied to human buildings. If termites could maintain stable conditions using only airflow and structure, why couldn't people do the same? When he set out to design the Eastgate Centre, he brought these ideas to life. The Eastgate Centre works much like a giant termite mound. It uses a network of ventilation shafts that act like the tunnels inside the mound. These shafts draw in cooler air at night when temperatures drop. During the day, as the sun heats the building, the warm air rises naturally and escapes through high vents. This constant cycle of intake and exhaust keeps the interior comfortable without mechanical cooling systems. The building's walls are thick and heavy, giving them what architects call thermal mass. This means they can absorb heat during the day and slowly release it at night. By buffering the temperature this way, the building avoids the sharp spikes that would otherwise make the interior unbearable. Windows are carefully placed to support this natural process. They aren't just for light or views. Their position helps direct airflow, guiding breezes through the building in predictable patterns. Together, these features create a living system, one that responds to changes in the environment without constant human control. The results are striking. The Eastgate Centre uses 90% less energy for cooling than other buildings of similar size. This isn't just good for the environment, it also saves money. In a region where energy costs are high and power supplies can be unreliable, reducing dependence on air conditioning makes the building more resilient. Tenants benefit from lower operating costs, while the city benefits from reduced demand on the electrical grid. This design also lowers the building's carbon footprint. Traditional air conditioning relies on electricity, much of which comes from fossil fuels. By using natural systems instead, the Eastgate Centre avoids many of the emissions that would come from constant mechanical cooling. Beyond the numbers, the building offers a different way of thinking about design. Most modern architecture starts with machines. We build sealed boxes and then rely on technology to make them livable. Air conditioners fight heat, furnaces fight cold, fans move stale air. The building becomes a machine inside a machine. The Eastgate Centre flips this idea. Instead of fighting the environment, it works with it. The design doesn't just imitate the shape of a termite mound, it imitates the way the mound functions. This is biomimicry at its core, learning from nature's processes, not just copying its appearance. When people see the Eastgate Centre, they often focus on its unusual look. Its towers and open spaces don't resemble typical office buildings, but the real achievement lies beneath the surface. Like the termite mound, its strength comes from the invisible flows of air and energy that move through it. Imagine standing inside on a hot day. You feel a faint breeze moving past, cool and steady. You know that outside, the sun is punishing, yet the interior feels calm and balanced. You're experiencing a system at work, one that doesn't need a switch to be flipped or a machine to hum. It just functions. Quietly and efficiently, this building has inspired architects around the world. Its success shows that sustainable design doesn't have to be an add-on or an afterthought. It can be built into the very bones of a structure. When done well, this approach creates spaces that are beautiful, functional, and deeply connected to their environment. The lessons from the Eastgate Centre go beyond cooling. They point to a broader way of thinking about architecture. Instead of seeing nature as something separate, we can see it as a teacher. A termite mound isn't just an insect colony. It's a living example of design shaped by time and necessity. By paying attention, we can find solutions to human problems that are both practical and profound. In Harare, a group of office workers go about their day. They type at computers, hold meetings, and sip coffee. Most of them probably don't think about termites as they work. But the air moving gently around them comes from the same principles that keep a fungus alive deep inside an earthen tower. The connection may be invisible, but it's real. The Eastgate Centre stands as proof that buildings can do more than provide shelter. They can breathe, they can adapt, they can learn from the natural systems that have been perfected over millions of years. It's not magic. It's design rooted in observation and respect for the world around us. For every building like the Eastgate Centre, where design and function merge seamlessly, there are many more that use the language of biomimicry without delivering its true benefits. The word itself has become fashionable. Developers, corporations, and even governments use it to market projects as innovative and sustainable. In many cases, the connection to nature is little more than a surface gesture. It looks impressive, but it doesn't solve the deeper problems of energy use, waste, or environmental impact. Take the rise of vertical gardens. In recent years, skyscrapers and office towers have started sprouting walls of greenery. From the street, these living facades can be breathtaking. Plants cascade down glass towers, softening hard lines and giving the impression that the building is in harmony with nature. To the casual observer, it feels like progress, a step towards cities that are greener and more alive. But a closer look often tells a different story. These gardens require constant care. The plants are not part of a functioning ecosystem. They rely on hidden irrigation systems that pump in water, often in large quantities. In dry climates, this means diverting precious resources to keep decorative plants alive. Fertilizers and pesticides may be used to control pests or encourage growth. The result is a system that consumes more energy and materials than it gives back. In many cases, the plants are not native to the area, so they don't support local insects, birds, or other wildlife. They are decoration, not habitat. The green wall becomes a stage set. It signals environmental awareness to passers-by and investors. A company with a building covered in plants can point to it as proof of their commitment to sustainability. Yet behind the scenes, the environmental benefits are often shallow. It's a performance designed for public relations, not a genuine partnership with the natural world. The same pattern can be seen in other forms of so-called green design. A building may feature rooftop gardens or natural materials, but these features are sometimes added late in the design process as marketing tools rather than as integral parts of the system. They look good in photographs and on brochures, but they don't always improve the building's function or reduce its impact. London's famous Gherkin building offers another example. Officially named 30 St. Mary Axe, the structure is one of the city's most recognizable landmarks. Its curved shape rises gracefully into the skyline, and its design was inspired in part by the structure of a sea sponge. The idea was to use natural principles to manage light, airflow, and temperature inside the building. On paper, it represents a leap forward in biomimetic design. The building's shape allows for natural light to reach deep into the interior spaces, reducing the need for artificial lighting. Its narrow top and wider base help guide air through the building in a way that supports passive ventilation. These features are clever and elegant. But critics argue that the building ultimately functions more as a metaphor than as a true ecosystem. It borrows the look and some of the strategies of nature, but it does not achieve the deep integration found in systems like a termite mound or a forest. The Gherkin's design reduces energy use compared to older buildings, but it still relies heavily on mechanical systems. Its environmental performance, while better than many, does not match the image of a self-sustaining, nature-inspired structure. In this way, it occupies a middle ground. It's a step toward biomimicry, but not a complete expression of it. Its striking appearance has become its most powerful feature, making it a symbol of modern London. The sea sponge metaphor gives it a story to tell, but the story is stronger than the reality. This gap between appearance and substance is common in contemporary architecture. True biomimicry requires deep understanding and careful planning. It asks architects to think in terms of systems, cycles, and relationships. That work takes time and resources. It also demands a shift in mindset. Instead of treating nature as a backdrop or a source of inspiration, designers must treat it as a guide. They must ask how a building can function like a living thing, not just look like one. Many projects never reach that level. It's easier and faster to copy the surface forms of nature. A curved roof can be said to mimic a leaf. A spiral staircase can evoke a seashell. These features photograph well and can be explained in a few sentences at a press conference. Investors and the public respond to these symbols because they are visible and easy to understand. The challenge is that this approach risks hollowing out the very idea of biomimicry. When the word is used too loosely, it loses meaning. A building that functions no differently from any other, but happens to have a few plants glued to its walls, is not truly nature-inspired. It's branding. Consider a skyscraper with a massive green facade in a city with limited water resources. The plants require daily irrigation. Trucks bring in fertilizer and remove clippings. Workers climb scaffolding to prune and replace dying sections. At night, grow lights flicker on to keep certain species alive through the winter. From a distance, the building looks like a vertical forest. Up close, it's a machine disguised as nature, one that demands constant inputs to maintain its illusion. This doesn't mean that green walls or sculptural buildings are inherently bad. Some are designed with genuine care, using native species, recycled water, and integrated systems that provide real benefits. But these examples are rare. Too often, the decision to add greenery comes from the marketing department rather than the design team. The Eastgate Centre in Zimbabwe works because its design is rooted in process. It doesn't need constant external support to function. Its cooling system emerges from the structure itself. In contrast, many so-called green buildings need ongoing external energy and labor to keep their natural features alive. This difference is crucial. Biomimicry, when done well, blurs the line between the natural and the human-made. A well-designed building doesn't just sit on the land. It participates in cycles of air, water, and energy. It adapts to its environment and supports the systems around it. When the word is reduced to a label, that deeper connection disappears. The temptation to use nature as decoration will always be strong. A wall of plants or a building shaped like a shell offers instant visual impact. It reassures people that progress is being made. But the real work of biomimicry happens behind the scenes, in the hidden flows and interactions that keep a system alive. Without that substance, the green facade is just that, a facade. In some parts of the world, architects have turned to nature not just for guidance, but for spectacle. These projects are massive, striking, and designed to inspire awe. They often blend practical features with theatrical displays, walking a line between functional biomimicry and visual storytelling. At their best, they provide real environmental benefits while also serving as landmarks. At their worst, they risk becoming elaborate stage sets, beautiful to look at, but disconnected from the natural systems they imitate. Singapore's Gardens by the Bay is one of the most famous examples. Rising above the park are the super trees, towering structures that look like something out of a science fiction film. From a distance, they resemble giant metallic trees with wide branching tops. These structures do more than look impressive. Some collect solar energy through panels built into their canopies. Others capture rainwater, which is then used to irrigate the surrounding gardens. Their wide crowns create shade, providing cooler spots for visitors in Singapore's hot, humid climate. As night falls, the super trees light up with vibrant displays. Music plays, and the park fills with people who come to see the show. In these moments, the structures transform into a spectacle, drawing tourists and locals alike. The effect is mesmerizing, but it raises a question. Are these super trees part of a living ecosystem, or are they high-tech imitations built for human entertainment? The super trees do have practical functions, and they reduce some of the park's reliance on outside energy and water. However, they are not self-sustaining. Their systems require maintenance and management. The plants growing on their sides are carefully selected and tended by teams of gardeners. Like vertical gardens on office buildings, these plantings do not replace the complex biodiversity of a natural forest. They simulate the look of nature while operating as engineered systems. Visitors often feel a sense of wonder when they see the super trees. That wonder has value. It sparks conversations about the role of nature in cities and the potential for green design. Yet the experience is controlled and curated. It is nature as performance, shaped to fit human expectations. The structures stand as a powerful symbol of what is possible, but they also highlight the tension between ecological function and visual impact. A similar dynamic can be seen in Beijing's National Stadium, built for the 2008 Olympics. Nicknamed the Bird's Nest, the stadium's design was inspired by a literal bird's nest. Its outer structure is a web of steel beams that crisscross and weave together in a pattern that appears organic and random. From the outside, it looks like a natural object that has been scaled up to monumental size. The bird's nest was a triumph of engineering and craftsmanship. It captured the imagination of millions during the Olympic Games, becoming a symbol of modern China. Its form told a story of strength, unity, and creativity. But while its appearance was inspired by nature, its function was entirely human-centered. The stadium does not mimic the processes of a nest. It does not regulate temperature through natural airflow or reuse materials the way birds do when they build. Its ecological value is limited. After the Olympics, the stadium faced challenges common to many megaprojects. Maintaining such a massive structure requires significant resources. The surrounding area, built to host the global event, struggled to find new uses once the games were over. In this way, the bird's nest reflects a broader issue with spectacular biomimetic designs. They can be powerful symbols in the moment, but they may not integrate well into the ongoing life of a city. These projects raise important questions about the role of nature in design. A building or structure can look alive without being part of a living system. The super trees resemble towering forest giants, but they depend on pumps, lights, and human care to function. The bird's nest captures the appearance of a natural form, but it does not behave like one. There is nothing inherently wrong with creating symbols or attractions. Cities need landmarks. People respond to beauty and narrative. The problem arises when these symbols are mistaken for solutions. A structure that appears green is not necessarily sustainable. A design that copies the shape of nature does not automatically copy its cycles or relationships. Consider a true forest. It captures sunlight, filters water, provides shelter, and recycles nutrients. Every part of it is connected. Waste from one process becomes input for another. This is what makes a forest resilient and self-sustaining. When architects borrow from nature, the challenge is to capture this level of integration, not just its outward appearance. The spectacle of mega projects can overshadow this deeper work. Tourists photograph the super trees or the bird's nest without thinking about the systems behind them. Governments point to these projects as proof of progress, while the harder, less visible tasks of creating functional urban ecosystems receive less attention. Imagine a future city where every building participates in cycles of energy, water, and waste, the way a natural landscape does. In that city, a structure like the super trees would not stand apart as a special attraction. It would be one part of a broader system, connected to the surrounding environment. Its beauty would come not just from its appearance, but from the way it contributes to the life around it. For now, many of these spectacular projects remain isolated. They show what technology and imagination can achieve, but they stop short of full ecological integration. They are statements rather than systems. The super trees, with their glowing lights and solar panels, blend utility and entertainment. The bird's nest, with its intricate web of steel, turns a natural form into a cultural icon. These designs remind us that humans are drawn to nature not only for its functions, but for its symbolism. A tree can be both a source of shade and a symbol of growth. A nest can represent both shelter and community. When architects work at a grand scale, these symbols become part of the built environment, shaping how people see their cities. The challenge is to move beyond symbols towards structures that are alive in more than appearance. A forest is beautiful because it works. Its beauty comes from relationships and flows that sustain life. Buildings can aspire to the same standard, but only if designers focus on the unseen connections that make systems thrive. Until then, many mega projects will remain what they are now, breathtaking spectacles that look like nature, but live only through the effort of human hands. Long before the word biomimicry was ever spoken, many communities were already living its principles. They did not see nature as something separate or something to be controlled. Instead, they built with it, learned from it, and allowed their own systems to grow alongside it. These practices were not experimental projects or temporary solutions. They were part of daily life, tested and refined over generations. In the hills of Meghalaya, in northeast India, rivers cut through deep valleys, making travel and connection between villages difficult. Instead of building stone bridges or importing modern materials, the Khasi and Jaintia people turned to the living trees around them. Using the roots of rubber fig trees, they guided the growth of these roots across the water. The process is slow. It can take decades before a bridge is strong enough to carry people. But over time, the roots grow thicker and more tightly woven. The bridge becomes stronger, not weaker as it ages. Unlike a metal or wooden bridge that begins to decay from the day it is finished, a living root bridge adapts to its environment. When floods come, the flexible roots bend instead of breaking. When a section is damaged, the tree sends out new growth to repair it. These bridges are not built and forgotten. They are tended like gardens, with each generation adding to the work of the one before. Walking across one of these bridges feels different from walking across a structure of steel or concrete. The air smells of leaves and river water. The roots underfoot are cool and damp, humming with life. The bridge is not just a tool for crossing. It is a living thing, shaped by human hands but growing according to its own rhythms. This is not imitation of nature. It is co-creation. The people and the trees rely on one another, forming a partnership that can last centuries. Far to the south, in the city of Kolkata, another kind of partnership exists. At first glance, Kolkata appears like many modern cities, crowded, busy, and full of challenges. But on its eastern edge lies a vast network of wetlands. For generations, these wetlands have served as the city's natural sewage treatment plant. Wastewater flows into the ponds and channels, where it is filtered and cleaned by plants and microorganisms. Fish thrive in these waters, feeding on nutrients that would otherwise pollute rivers and coastlines. Local farmers use the treated water to grow vegetables and rice. This system does more than process waste. It supports livelihoods. Fishermen, farmers, and city workers all depend on it. No single person or machine controls the wetlands. They function through balance, with each part supporting the others. When sewage enters the wetlands, it's not seen as a problem to be hidden or destroyed. It is a resource that fuels life. The wetlands have survived despite pressure from rapid urban growth. Developers have often tried to fill in parts of the area to make room for buildings or roads. Each time, communities have fought to protect them, knowing that their disappearance would disrupt both the environment and the economy. The wetlands show what it looks like when a city works with natural cycles instead of against them. They are infrastructure, but they are also ecosystem. Their strength comes from the fact that they do not rely on constant outside energy or intervention. They are self-sustaining, like a forest or a river delta. On the island of Bali, water has always been a sacred resource. For more than 1,000 years, Balinese farmers have managed their rice fields through a system called Subak. At its core, Subak is about sharing. Water flows down from volcanic springs through a network of canals and terraces. At each stage, farmers gather at water temples to make decisions about distribution. These decisions are guided by spiritual beliefs as well as practical needs. The temples are not only places of worship, they are also meeting grounds where ecological knowledge is passed down. Subak is more than irrigation. It is a way of life that ties farming to community and belief. By working together, farmers ensure that water reaches every field without exhausting the source. The pattern of planting and harvesting is coordinated to reduce pests naturally, without heavy use of chemicals. The landscape itself reflects this harmony. From above, the terraces curve like green waves across the hillsides, each level holding water that reflects the sky. What makes Subak remarkable is its resilience. Over centuries, it has adapted to changes in population, climate, and technology. It works because it is deeply embedded in both culture and landscape. The system does not simply copy nature. It evolves with it, responding to feedback in the same way a living organism does. These examples show a different side of biomimicry. The living root bridges, the Kolkata wetlands, and the Subak irrigation system are not projects designed to impress outsiders. They were not built for photographs or tourism, though people now travel to see them. They emerged from necessity and relationship. In each case, the line between human and natural systems blurs. A bridge is not separate from a tree. A sewage pond is not separate from a fishery. A water temple is not separate from a rice terrace. When people live this way, they don't just borrow nature's ideas. They become part of the system they are learning from. This creates solutions that are durable because they are not imposed from the outside. They grow like roots, adapting to their surroundings. They are maintained not by machines or budgets alone, but by culture and memory. Modern biomimicry often looks to cutting-edge science for inspiration, and there is value in that. Engineers study the airflow of termite mounds or the structure of seashells. They build simulations and test prototypes. But there is another kind of knowledge, one held in the practices of communities that have lived close to the land for centuries. These systems may not use the language of design theory, but they embodied its deepest principles. A living root bridge is not a prototype. It is a teacher. The Kolkata wetlands are not an experiment. They are a living, functioning proof of what happens when a city recognizes its dependence on natural flows. The Subak system is not a relic. It is a reminder that spirituality and ecology can work hand in hand. In these places, there is no need to talk about sustainability as a separate goal. Sustainability is woven into daily life. The work of maintaining balance happens through rituals, shared labor, and mutual respect. When a farmer cleans a canal or a villager tends a root bridge, they are participating in a cycle that began long before them and will continue long after. These practices show that true biomimicry is not about copying forms or even processes in isolation. It is about co-evolution, humans and nature shaping each other over time, creating systems that are both practical and meaningful. These systems endure not because they are perfect, but because they are alive. Imagine a building that is not just a container for human life, but a living participant in its environment. A wall that repairs itself after a storm. A roof that collects rainwater, filters it, and sends it back into the system clean and ready to use. A structure that generates its own power the way a tree captures sunlight. These ideas sound like science fiction, but researchers are working to make them real. Among them is Dr. Rachel Armstrong, a scientist and architect who envisions a future where our buildings behave like living organisms. For centuries, buildings have been static. Once built, they age, decay, and require constant maintenance. Cracks form in the walls. Roofs leak, pipes rust. When parts fail, humans replace them with new materials. This cycle consumes resources and creates waste. In contrast, living systems don't work this way. A tree doesn't need a contractor to fix a broken branch. It repairs itself through growth and adaptation. Dr. Armstrong's work aims to bring that same resilience to architecture. One of the most promising developments in this field is a project called metabolic bricks. These are not ordinary bricks baked from clay or concrete. They are infused with living microbes that perform useful tasks. Each brick functions like a tiny bioreactor. When connected together, they create a network capable of processing waste, generating energy, and producing valuable byproducts. Picture a wall built from these bricks. As household waste flows into the system, the microbes inside the bricks break it down. During this process, they release small amounts of electricity, enough to power sensors or lighting within the building. At the same time, they produce useful substances like fertilizer, which can be collected and used to grow food. Instead of sending waste to landfills or treatment plants, the building itself becomes part of the solution. The implications of this are profound. In many cities, managing waste and energy requires sprawling infrastructure. Power plants burn fuel to create electricity. Trucks haul garbage to distant landfills. Sewage treatment facilities use massive amounts of water and chemicals. A building made of metabolic bricks could handle some of these tasks on site, reducing the need for external systems. In rural areas or disaster zones, such buildings could provide essential services without relying on centralized grids or pipelines. The technology behind these bricks draws directly from nature. Microbes have been recycling matter and producing energy for billions of years. In a forest, bacteria break down fallen leaves, releasing nutrients that feed plants. In wetlands, microorganisms filter water as part of a complex web of life. By harnessing these natural processes, researchers can create systems that are efficient and self-sustaining. Dr. Armstrong describes this approach as a step beyond traditional biomimicry. Instead of simply copying the appearance or function of natural systems, it brings living matter directly into the structure itself. The building doesn't just mimic an organism, it becomes one. Like a coral reef or a termite mound, it exists as a dynamic, responsive network. Consider how this might change the way people interact with their homes. If a crack forms in the wall, the microbes within the bricks could respond by producing materials to seal it. If the building senses that it is holding too much moisture, it could redirect water to prevent damage. Over time, the structure could adapt to changes in climate or usage, much like a tree adjusts its growth to reach sunlight or withstand wind. These ideas challenge the way architecture is usually understood. Most buildings are planned with fixed blueprints. Every detail is decided before construction begins. Once built, the structure remains largely the same until it is demolished. Living architecture, by contrast, is never truly finished. It evolves alongside its inhabitants. This requires a shift in mindset, from seeing buildings as objects to seeing them as systems. There are practical challenges to overcome. Keeping microbes alive within a brick requires careful design. The balance of nutrients, moisture, and temperature must be maintained. Safety is also a concern. The microbes must be contained and managed to prevent unwanted growth or contamination. Engineers are developing ways to control these systems, such as by programming the microbes to respond only to specific signals. Another challenge is cost. Traditional materials like concrete and steel are cheap and widely available. Living materials are still experimental and expensive to produce. As research advances, economies of scale may reduce costs, but widespread adoption will take time. Despite these hurdles, the potential benefits are enormous. Buildings made of living materials could reduce reliance on external infrastructure. They could lower carbon emissions by producing energy locally and recycling waste on site. They could also create healthier environments for the people inside them. For example, certain microbes could be selected to filter air naturally, reducing the need for mechanical ventilation systems. Imagine an urban neighborhood built with these principles. Each house generates its own electricity for its walls and roofs. Rainwater flows through filtration systems built into the structure, providing clean water for drinking and washing. Waste is broken down into harmless compounds or transformed into resources like fertilizer and biofuel. Streets and public spaces are shaded by structures that, like trees, regulate temperature and improve air quality. The neighborhood functions like an ecosystem, with energy and materials cycling continuously. Armstrong's vision extends beyond individual buildings. She imagines entire cities designed as living entities. In this model, streets, parks, and infrastructure are not separate from nature. They are woven together, much like the interconnected parts of a forest. When one area experiences stress, such as flooding or drought, the system adapts to balance itself. This approach could help cities cope with climate change. Rising temperatures, stronger storms, and shifting rainfall patterns threaten traditional infrastructure. Living architecture offers resilience by building adaptation into the design. Instead of repairing damage after it occurs, the system responds in real time, preventing small problems from becoming disasters. The idea of buildings that grow, heal, and interact with their surroundings may seem futuristic, but history offers precedents. Indigenous structures, like the living root bridges of India or the Subak irrigation networks of Bali, show that humans have long partnered with living systems. Dr. Armstrong's work brings that ancient wisdom into a modern context, using science to create structures that embody the same principles. As technology progresses, the boundary between the natural and the built environment may blur. A wall may no longer be just a wall. It could be a habitat, a power source, and a water filter all at once. In this future, cities would not simply sit on the land like separate entities. They would participate in the cycles of life around them, growing and changing like organisms. Living architecture is not about decoration or symbolism. It is about function. A building made of metabolic bricks does not need to pretend to be green. Its processes speak for themselves. The challenge ahead lies in scaling these ideas while maintaining safety, affordability, and cultural relevance. If those challenges are met, the buildings of the future will not just shelter life, they will be alive. A single building can change the way people think about design, but true biomimicry demands something larger. It asks us to rethink the entire city, not just individual structures. A city is more than a collection of houses, offices, and roads. It is a network of systems, much like a forest or a wetland. When we see it this way, new possibilities emerge. Streets can act like rivers, guiding the flow of water and air. Buildings can behave like organisms, sharing energy and resources. Waste can become fuel for growth rather than a burden to be buried or burned. Many cities today are fragmented. Pockets of green space are cut off from one another by highways and development. Birds, insects, and mammals are forced into smaller and smaller habitats. This isolation weakens entire ecosystems. One way to address this is through urban wild corridors, continuous stretches of habitat that connect parks, gardens, and natural areas. These corridors allow animals to move freely, spreading seeds and maintaining genetic diversity. Imagine a city where the rooftops are covered with native plants, forming a patchwork of connected greenways. Bridges across busy roads are built not just for cars and pedestrians, but for wildlife, with soil and vegetation that allow animals to cross safely. Streams and wetlands are restored rather than paved over, providing both flood protection and vital habitat. Such a network would not only benefit wildlife, it would also help regulate temperature, filter air, and manage stormwater naturally. Some cities have begun experimenting with these ideas. In Singapore, planners have created a network of green connectors that allow both people and wildlife to travel through the city in a continuous loop. In the Netherlands, wildlife crossings span major highways, reconnecting fragmented forests. These efforts treat urban landscapes as part of a living system rather than as separate human-only spaces. But physical connections are only one part of the puzzle. A truly living city also needs circular flows of materials and energy. In most modern cities, resources move in one direction. Raw materials are extracted, transported, used, and then discarded. This linear model creates mountains of waste and drains the ecosystems that supply the inputs. Nature works differently. In a forest, nothing is thrown away. Fallen leaves decompose, feeding the soil. Dead trees provide shelter for animals and fungi. Waste from one process becomes fuel for another. Applying this principle to cities requires rethinking how materials move through the urban environment. For example, organic waste from restaurants and homes can be collected and composted to support urban farms. Construction debris can be sorted and reused rather than sent to landfills. Water can be captured, filtered, and reused instead of being flushed away after a single use. Factories can exchange byproducts so that the output of one becomes the input of another. Consider a neighborhood where every building is part of a shared resource loop. Rainwater for rooftops flows into tanks that supply community gardens. Food scraps are processed into compost and fertilizer. Heat generated by factories is captured and used to warm nearby homes. In such a system, waste does not exist. Everything has value because everything is connected. This approach is not only ecological but practical. It reduces dependence on expensive external infrastructure and makes cities more resilient to shocks. When supply chains are disrupted, a city with internal loops can continue to function. When extreme weather strikes, systems designed to mimic natural cycles can absorb stress instead of collapsing. Food production offers another opportunity to merge urban life with natural systems. Most cities import their food from distant farms, requiring vast amounts of transportation and refrigeration. This not only consumes energy, but also disconnects people from the sources of their sustenance. Urban agriculture can help bridge this gap. Imagine an office building where part of the rooftop is dedicated to growing vegetables and herbs. The building's waste heat warms the greenhouse in winter. Rainwater captured from the roof irrigates the plants. Workers can step outside during lunch breaks to harvest food for communal meals. These office farms do more than supply produce. They create microclimates, cooling the surrounding air and providing habitat for pollinators. They also foster a sense of connection between the building's occupants and the natural cycles that support their lives. On a larger scale, entire districts could be designed to integrate food production into their fabric. Vertical farms could be built into high-rise structures, using sunlight and recycled water to grow crops year-round. Community gardens could be linked by green corridors, forming a network of edible landscapes. By bringing food production closer to where people live, cities can reduce transportation emissions and improve food security. While technology plays an important role in these visions, the deeper challenge is cultural. Modern cities are built on an idea of separation. Nature is something outside the walls, something to visit in parks or preserve in distant reserves. The city itself is seen as artificial, a realm of concrete and steel. This mindset shapes how policies are made, how land is valued, and how people relate to their surroundings. Shifting to a model where cities are seen as extensions of nature requires more than new infrastructure. It requires a change in perspective. People must begin to see themselves not as owners of the land, but as participants in its systems. This means recognizing that urban life depends on clean air, water, and soil just as much as rural life does. It also means accepting that humans are not the only inhabitants of the city. Birds, insects, plants, and microorganisms all play roles in keeping the system healthy. Education can play a key role in this shift. Schools can teach children to observe the flows of water and energy in their neighborhoods. Public spaces can include signs and installations that explain the functions of urban ecosystems. Community projects can involve residents in activities like tree planting, composting, or habitat restoration. When people understand how their actions fit into larger cycles, they are more likely to support policies that protect and enhance those cycles. Policy is another critical piece. Zoning laws, building codes, and economic incentives all shape the form of a city. If these tools reward short-term profit over long-term balance, efforts to create living systems will falter. Governments can encourage circular practices by supporting recycling industries, penalizing wasteful processes, and investing in green infrastructure. They can also protect urban wild corridors and prioritize mixed-use development that reduces the need for cars and sprawling roads. Cities are already ecosystems, even if they are poorly functioning ones. They consume energy, process materials, and produce waste. The question is whether they will continue to act like closed, isolated systems or whether they will open themselves to the flows and connections that sustain life. By reimagining cities as living organisms, planners, architects, and citizens can create places where human and natural systems are not in conflict, but in partnership. The transformation will not happen overnight. It will require patience and experimentation. Mistakes will be made, and solutions will evolve through trial and error, just as they do in nature. But each step toward integration brings benefits. Cleaner water, healthier air, more resilient communities, and richer biodiversity are not abstract ideals. They are tangible outcomes that can improve daily life. A future city designed as an ecosystem would look and feel different from today's urban landscapes. Streets would double as waterways during storms, carrying excess rain to restored wetlands. Buildings would produce energy and food as naturally as trees produce leaves and fruit. Neighborhoods would hum with the quiet work of recycling and regeneration. In such a city, the boundary between the built and the natural would blur until it became impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Many of the world's most striking buildings sit at the crossroads of two desires. On one side is the genuine wish to create structures that work with nature, reduce harm, and respond to their environment. On the other is the human drive to build monuments, to make bold statements, to be remembered. These impulses are not always in conflict, but they are rarely in perfect balance. Often, the result is a building that is both an ecological experiment and a spectacle, a symbol of what we hope to achieve, rather than a seamless part of the natural world. In Seattle, there is a building that has been called the greenest commercial structure in the world. The Bullitt Center rises 6 stories, modest in scale compared to the skyscrapers of major cities, but ambitious in its vision. From the outside, its most visible feature is its large overhanging roof covered in solar panels. These panels capture enough sunlight to meet the building's energy needs over the course of a year. This achievement is impressive in a city known for its gray, rainy skies. Inside, every detail has been designed to minimize waste and maximize efficiency. The toilets are composting, breaking down human waste into safe, usable material without the need for a traditional sewage connection. Rainwater is collected and filtered, providing a supply of clean water without relying entirely on municipal systems. The building's materials were chosen to avoid toxins, ensuring that construction did not introduce harmful substances into the environment. Sensors and feedback systems track energy use, allowing occupants to see exactly how their actions affect the building's performance. Walking through the Bullitt Center feels different from being in a standard office building. The air is fresh, filled with natural light streaming through wide windows. Wooden beams and floors give the space warmth, a reminder of the forests from which they came. The building encourages its users to take the stairs rather than the elevator by placing the stairwell in a prominent sunlit location. Every design choice is deliberate, aimed at shaping behavior as well as conserving resources, and yet for all its achievements, the Bullitt Center is still a controlled, engineered system. It mimics some of the functions of nature, like water cycling and energy capture, but it does not generate its own flows organically. The solar panels require maintenance and eventual replacement. The composting toilets need human oversight to keep them working properly. The rainwater system depends on pumps, filters, and regulations that must be managed carefully. This is not a forest or a wetland where countless organisms interact in ways that are self-balancing and resilient. It is a human creation, carefully tuned to meet specific goals. If any part of its system fails, the balance can quickly unravel. In this sense, it represents a step toward ecological harmony, but not a full embodiment of it. This tension reflects a larger struggle in sustainable design. When we build something like the Bullitt Center, are we truly collaborating with nature, or are we creating a stage on which to perform our intentions? A building can be efficient and even inspiring, but still remains separate from the living systems around it. It can show us what is possible without fully becoming part of the cycle it represents. The question becomes even sharper when the building itself is a cultural landmark. Many iconic structures are designed to capture attention. Their forms are bold, their stories carefully crafted. A building like this says something about its city, its era, its values. When sustainability enters this equation, it often takes on a symbolic role. A green roof becomes a visual cue, signaling environmental awareness. A wall of plants suggests connection to nature, even if the plants are kept alive by hidden machinery and constant care. This doesn't mean these features are meaningless. Symbols have power. A striking building can influence public opinion and inspire change. The problem arises when the symbol replaces the substance. A building that looks sustainable but functions like any other may actually slow progress by giving the illusion of success. Consider the difference between a forest and a city block. In a forest, sunlight, water, and nutrients flow through countless interconnected pathways. Trees, animals, fungi, and microbes all play roles in maintaining balance. Waste from one organism becomes food for another. The system is self-sustaining, resilient, and constantly adapting. On a city block, even one filled with green technology, the flows are more rigid. Water comes from pipes, electricity from wires, food from trucks. Waste leaves through other pipes and trucks, bound for treatment plants or landfills. Even if the block has solar panels and compost bins, the underlying structure remains linear rather than circular. It relies on external systems to function. The bullet center moves closer to circularity than most buildings, but it is still only one piece of a much larger puzzle. Its success depends on policies, infrastructure, and cultural practices beyond its walls. If those external systems remain unsustainable, the building's impact is limited. It can model new possibilities, but it cannot achieve them alone. This is why many spectacular buildings reveal as much about human ambition as they do about nature. The very act of declaring a building the greenest or most sustainable reflects a competitive mindset. It turns ecological design into a contest, with points scored for innovation and visual drama. Nature does not operate this way. There are no trophies in a forest, no headlines in a coral reef. The value of the system lies in its quiet, continuous function. Our most spectacular buildings often express a longing for this kind of seamless integration. We design them to look like trees, nests, or waves because we want to feel connected to something larger. But sometimes, the very scale of these projects undermines their purpose. The resources required to build them may outweigh the benefits they provide. Their uniqueness can make them difficult to replicate, turning them into isolated experiments rather than models for widespread change. The tension between spectacle and function plays out in countless ways. A rooftop garden might be lush and beautiful, but if it requires constant irrigation with treated water, its ecological value is limited. A glass tower might boast advanced shading systems inspired by plant leaves, but if it relies on massive air conditioning units to remain habitable, the resemblance is superficial. In this light, the question becomes not just what a building does, but why it exists in the first place. Is it meant to solve a problem or to tell a story? Is it a participant in natural cycles or a symbol placed on the landscape? These are difficult questions because humans need both function and meaning. A purely utilitarian structure may fail to inspire care or connection. A purely symbolic one may inspire admiration without real change. As designers, planners, and citizens, we must face this duality honestly. A building like the Bullet Center shows that progress is possible. It demonstrates techniques that can reduce harm and foster awareness. But it also reminds us that even our best efforts are still human constructs, bound by our limitations. Standing inside such a building, surrounded by sunlight and fresh air, it is tempting to believe we have achieved harmony with nature. Yet outside, the larger systems of roads, factories, and power grids continue to operate much as they always have. The building is a glimpse of what could be, not a complete transformation. The struggle to balance collaboration and performance mirrors our broader relationship with the natural world. We want to live in partnership, but we also want to display our achievements. Sometimes these desires align. Sometimes they clash. The path forward lies not in choosing one over the other, but in recognizing the tension and working within it. Only then can our buildings and our cities begin to reflect both our aspirations and the living systems that make them possible. The story of biomimicry is, in many ways, the story of human ambition. From the first bridges of woven tree roots to modern towers that breathe like termite mounds, it reflects our ongoing effort to live in harmony with the world that shaped us. We have built soaring structures inspired by seashells and nests. We have covered walls in greenery, created farms on rooftops, and engineered bricks alive with microbes. Each step feels like progress, a move toward a future where cities and nature are no longer at odds. Yet beneath these achievements lies a persistent tension. Too often, we treat nature as a source of ideas to borrow rather than a partner to collaborate with. We look at a spider's web and admire its strength, then copy its shape without understanding the web of relationships that gave rise to it. We see the cooling tunnels of a termite mound and design similar vents for our buildings, while ignoring the interconnected colony that makes those tunnels function. In doing so, we reduce nature to a set of blueprints and metaphors. When our buildings focus only on appearance, they risk becoming spectacles rather than systems. A skyscraper covered in plants may look like a vertical forest, but if those plants are kept alive by pumps, fertilizers, and constant labor, the building is a stage set, not a habitat. A stadium shaped like a bird's nest may be visually stunning, but its structure has little to do with the ecological cycles that sustain life. These designs impress the eye while doing little to restore the balance they imitate. This gap between image and reality is dangerous. While we create these beautiful illusions, the ecosystems around us continue to break down. Rivers grow polluted, forests vanish, species disappear. The systems that support human life grow weaker, even as we cover our cities with symbolic gestures of sustainability. It is like painting a landscape on the wall while the real one outside crumbles. The future of architecture depends on a radical shift in perspective. It is no longer enough to copy nature's forms. We must embody its functions. A tree does not exist to be beautiful, though it is. Its shape arises from its work, capturing sunlight, pulling water from the soil, exchanging gases with the air. Every part of it serves a role within a network of relationships. If a building is to be truly alive, it must operate the same way. It must take in energy and materials, use them efficiently, and return them to the system in forms that sustain life. This means moving beyond decoration. A rooftop garden that simply looks green is not enough. A true urban ecosystem would cycle water, filter air, support wildlife, and connect to other green spaces across the city. Wastewater would not be hidden in underground pipes, but processed and reused. Organic waste would become food for urban farms. Materials would flow in loops rather than in straight lines leading to landfills. In this kind of city, buildings would not just sit on the land. They would participate in its cycles as active members of a larger whole. Consider a neighborhood where every structure works like part of a forest. The walls generate electricity, capturing sunlight the way leaves do. The roofs collect rainwater and filter it, releasing it slowly to prevent floods. Food is grown on site, nourished by compost created from kitchen scraps. Even the air is cleaner because the buildings themselves help filter pollutants. In such a place, the line between nature and architecture blurs until it disappears. The city does not compete with its environment. It becomes an extension of it. Reaching this vision will require more than new technology. It will demand a shift in culture and values. For centuries, cities have been built as symbols of human power, rising above the landscape rather than flowing with it. Roads and grids cut across rivers and hills without regard for natural patterns. The land was something to be conquered, flattened, and paved. To build with nature instead of against it, we must first change how we see ourselves. We are not separate from nature. Every breath we take, every meal we eat, every drop of water we drink comes from living systems. When those systems fail, our buildings cannot protect us. A skyscraper may shield us from wind and rain, but it cannot create oxygen or pollinate crops. The collapse of an ecosystem is also the collapse of a city, even if the buildings remain standing. The Eastgate Centre in Zimbabwe offers a glimpse of what collaboration can look like. Inspired by termite mounds, it cools itself naturally without air conditioners, saving vast amounts of energy. It is a step toward buildings that function as part of their environment. But even this success highlights how far we have to go. The building mimics a single natural process. The next challenge is to integrate many processes, creating structures that balance temperature, water, waste, and energy all at once. Rachel Armstrong's work with living materials points to another future. Imagine bricks filled with microbes that digest waste, generate electricity, and even repair themselves. These are not passive materials. They are active participants in the building's life. Over time, they could allow architecture to evolve the way ecosystems do, growing stronger and more complex instead of decaying. But the most profound changes will come when entire cities function this way. Picture urban wild corridors weaving between buildings, allowing animals and plants to move freely. Picture factories where the byproducts of one process feed another, creating a closed loop with no waste. Picture communities where food is grown locally, energy is produced on-site, and every resource is used again and again. These are not dreams. They are extensions of patterns that have existed in nature for millions of years. The challenge is to make our designs as adaptive and interconnected as the systems they imitate. This requires humility. Nature has been refining its processes far longer than humans have been building. Forests, coral reefs, and wetlands are not just collections of organisms. They are networks of relationships, tested through time and shaped by countless interactions. Our task is not to replace these systems, but to join them. Every decision matters. A single building may seem small compared to the scale of global problems, but each one sets a precedent. When a neighborhood adopts circular water systems, it becomes a model for others. When a city restores its wetlands, it creates both flood protection and habitat. These choices ripple outward just as a tree's roots affect the soil around it. The stakes are high. If we continue to treat nature as a backdrop or a theme, we will build cities that are beautiful on the surface, but fragile at their core. The collapse of ecosystems will make these cities unlivable, no matter how advanced their technology or striking their design. A building shaped like a tree will not save us if the forests are gone. The path forward is clear. Even if it is difficult, we must stop seeing our structures as separate from the systems that sustain them. We must design with the same patience and interdependence that nature uses. This means working with living processes, embracing complexity, and accepting that our role is to participate, not dominate. If we don't build with nature, as one architect put it, we risk demolishing ourselves along with it. This is not a warning about aesthetics or style. It is a simple truth. Our future depends on whether our cities become living ecosystems or remain isolated machines. The choice is ours to make, and the time to make it is now.